So between those trees, in that little dip with the arrows pointing, is a radio mast, and it's on Ivy Farm, or what used to be Ivy Farm. If you want to know what more about that and what it had to do with World War II and code breaking and Bletchley Park even, watch the rest of the video. Hello and welcome back to the channel. So this whole video is about a story of a little building, a little farmhouse that was a top secret location for code deciphering from German signals. Now the unique thing about this was this little farmhouse was just a normal little farmhouse, purchased, requisitioned, and the fields around it as well, so they could put up a listening station and fields of various antennas, and also some wooden huts which would be used as research and development. Now this has all been released recently by GCHQ. Now Ivy Farm is private land, as I said, so most of this video I'm not actually going to film it here because I'm knackered. I've been filming more segments, more discoveries, because we're right at the location where I filmed the two videos, The House on the Hill and The Devil's Ponds, which was about a silk merchant, James Vasseur, and his house and the grounds and the ruins and what's left to be hidden. And I found a ton more, so that's going to take me a while to get that all sort of worked out, because it's now joining some dots on the layout of that video. But I don't want to go on about that too much, that'll be an upcoming. But I'm going to walk out of here now and we'll pick this story up because it's so intriguing that what happened here and a few other stations like it dotted around the country, what they were listening for was, what happened here is they were listening for not just German signals, these were strange noise signals, encoded, encrypted, and it wasn't speech, so they developed a system of deciphering them, and through the help of Bletchley Park they were able to decode them. And the story of the things they were responsible of foiling certain German activities was incredible. Just out of a little sleepy village in Knockholt in Kent. As I said when I was filming that, I'm not going to film all of it there. The reason was purely because Ivy Farm, Ivy House, the cottage is private residence, and I don't think it's the right thing to go running around with cameras just to take photograph of what's now a house. But what's relevant about the story is we all know of the fantastic work Alan Turing and all of his staff did at Bletchley House with the invention of the rotating machine he built, which deciphered the Enigma. But what people don't realise is there was a series of what they called Y stations dotted around the country, and Ivy Farm was one of them. And it was all part of listening to these sounds. At the time, these Y stations were under the control of the Government Communications Wireless Stations, or otherwise known as the GCWS, which then became GCHQ in later years. But Ivy Farm was a part of that. Now, these stations listening for these strange sounds that the Germans had encrypted. The Enigma at Bletchley Park was obviously the Enigma machine, which was completely different to what these sounds were hearing. But using Bletchley Park to aid them, they found out that this was basically a type of ciphered encrypted fax sounding. So there was evidence that the Germans were using a teleprinter style signal that we basically would call that a fax now, but they were encrypting it. Now, it was first discovered that they were doing this in 1940 at the Metropolitan Police site station at Denmark Hill, but due to a lack of cryptographers, little sense could be made of this, and messages and transmissions from stations appeared to cease after time. So nothing more was done about it. In mid-1941, teleprinter transmissions on the decimeter wavelengths began to be intercepted at the RAF VHF station at Knockholt, but again, due to a continued lack of resources, they could not be deciphered or printed out. So it was then decided that special investigation into these decimeter transmissions should be undertaken, but which Knockholt they didn't have the facilities for. Authority was obtained to search for a suitable location for the station, and Ivy Farm farmhouse was requisitioned in May 1942. Together, along with 30 acres of land from the local MP Sir Walden Smithers, a further 130 acres of land was added in 1942. From then the station was gradually expanded with a continuous programme of building. The personnel were housed in the farmhouse itself, a cottage and the Nissan huts. It was semi-operational by mid-1942, but not fully complete until later that year. So now they had worked out that there was all this encrypted teletyped fax style messages being broadcasted, the emphasis was to fully understand this. So they came up with all various different types of decoding ciphers, and the tape method was one of them on the machines. Now this was all linked up with Bletchley Park and everything, and the whole project, these messages were given the code name Fish, and there were so many different departments involved. Now going back to say the Alan Turing and the machines there, you know, all of this deciphering and all the efforts that were done at Ivy Farm in the research and development huts eventually created what was to be known as the first supercomputer Colossus, which predates anything else of its time, and it's a huge thing. I think it was the size of the room, but it all goes back to these little farmhouses that all are part of a chain that all combined with the work they did at Bletchley Park was able to crack German codes. And without the help of all this staff, the men and women that served in and lived and worked in these little places hidden away, most probably likely not allowed to communicate with friends and family during this time, did the most unbelievable thing they could do, and that was to decipher codes that were designed to be unbreakable. So this is a completely different video to the way I would normally do it, where we're out and about. We're down here at the allotment, but this story was just one that I felt there was a lot on the internet about it you can read and find, such as I've got here, because I can't script and remember everything. so I've had to do it in this sort of format. But I'm a keen licensed amateur radio hobbyist, and this is just fascinating to someone like me, of the things they've done. I mean, I love to experiment with antennas and things and make different aerials and contacts all over the world, but what they were doing here is incredible. But the interesting thing was, if I read from this, the ciphertexts, which were mainly intercepted using national HRO and AR-88 shortwave receivers, and I've got a picture of those, was sent to Station X. Now, Station X was in Bletchley itself. Now, they sent it via two different routes. Firstly, they were sent parallel from Knockholt here, well, near here, to Bletchley using a British teleprinter over two different lines of the British GPO, the General Post Office Network. Now, I guess we call that Telecom, British Telecom. And they were received by two different teleprinters. After being checked for identity, they were only used if they were identical or contained a maximum of 5 errors. Otherwise, the transmissions had to be repeated. Secondly, the original punch tapes and the undulator tapes were driven by a dispatch rider, which was quite common at that time. So by the motorcycle up to the route to Bletchley from these stations. So the British code breakers successfully deciphered and analysed the message for intelligence purposes. Up to 400,000 letters of plain text were detected per day. The German secret telegrams offered continued strategical importance to wartime information, which the British compiled under the code name Ultra and used for their own planning. So at the beginning of this film, when we were out by Ivy Farm, I'd also been filming a lot of other things, as I also mentioned earlier in this film, and that's why I sort of cut it short, because it was a bit of a strange day to sort of find two films in one sort of location like that, which I wasn't expecting or planned. But I just felt that doing it this way, at least the story gets told and those people get remembered for the work they did. But I did also mention about some of the strange things they foiled, and this was just one I thought was interesting of many other interesting facts. So staff intercepted and isolated this noise, as we know, which was passed on to Bletchley's deciphering departments, and ultimately led to the creation of Colossus, the world's super big computer, eventually. And it was also responsible for the first ever UK interception of a fax, essentially. But this is the one I find interesting. A Japanese press attaché in Berlin had sent a fax featuring details of US bomber squadrons and formations to Tokyo-based press agency, intended for the Japanese military so they could better attack the US Air Force. This information was passed to the US allies so they could adapt their tactics accordingly. So, without giving it away that we had broken it, just like Enigma, they were able to manipulate these messages, and use them to their advantage. It's just an incredible time and piece of history, and I really hope you enjoyed this video, because it was just a great story, and a lot of people who I know don't realise the significance, and I wonder if the people who actually live in that farmhouse do now. I'm sure they do, because it's quite widely publicised on the web, so that you can find that anywhere. But what an incredible story, and yeah, we owe, I think, a lot to those people. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. It really helps us out. I say we're a small channel and we love getting out and doing these things, but it really gives us a boost. Right, until next time.